My name is Kim Jones. I think of myself as a New York artist, but actually I started in Los Angeles. I went to school there. I went to various art schools, but the big one was Chenard's, which later became CalArts. I went to Chenard's from '64 to '66, then I went into the US Marines for 3 years. People started calling me Stickman or Mudman. Actually, Chris Burden used to call me Dirtman in Los Angeles, and I started doing it around '74 or so. At first, I didn't have any mud on me. I just had the structures, various structures that I made. And they were actually sculptures at first that were made out of bamboo and latex, very light, that I attached to my body. Performance thing was really very active, and those are the people that I got to know very well. Barbara Burden was the ex-wife of Chris Burden, and they had this alternative art gallery where they would find a space or produce a performance or whatever an artist wanted to do. And so they are the ones that did Wilshire Walk. And so when I first wanted to do it, I just wanted to do it at night, just to walk through the night, the 18 miles, starting in downtown LA to Santa Monica. And so Barbara Burden, I remember, said, well, why don't you do it during the day too? So I did it twice. January 28th, my birthday, '76, and then a week later, February the 4th, through the night. So it was 12 hours each time, and it's 18 miles. And I moved to New York in, I think it was April of '82. So I had a studio for 2 years at PS1, beginning in around '83 or so. Well, I would do installations. They'd have shows there maybe 3 or 4 times a year. The war drawings started on little 8x10 sheets of paper. The earliest ones I have are roughly from '58. I may have done them slightly earlier, but it was mostly a game that I played by myself, where I created this world, a flat world that was inhabited by X's and dots and black tanks and white tanks. And they lived in a maze or a labyrinth, and there were rivers, and at that point there were trees and places where they lived. And I never really thought of those as art. It was always a secret game that I played, and I would usually just throw them away. If you think of a map as a particular place, it's not. They're maps of someplace that's in my head, but it's no particular place. Like, it may look like Rome or New York or London, but it's not. It's just in my head. Not just, but it is in my head. It's a place. And the difference between the war drawings and my other kinds of drawings, which are more connected to art history, to influences by anything from Degas, Rembrandt, to Michelangelo, to Jackson Pollock, to Cy Twombly. Probably a lot of Cy Twombly in there. And then the war drawings, I don't really think of composition. It's more about these very simple rules with the X's and dots, and on one side of the paper would be the fortress or the city for the X's, and one side would be the fortress of the city for the dots. I think I got the idea from, in children's books, at the end of some of these books and magazines, there's a maze or a labyrinth where there's a treasure in the middle of it, and you have to draw a line through the labyrinth to get the treasure. And so I think I got the idea from that, but also actually from, and at that time I think it was Life magazine, various magazines had images of architectural drawings of houses. And so I can remember as a child looking at those architectural drawings, and actually I still have a few drawings of my dream house where I would make an architectural drawing of a house, the outside of the swimming pool. It was all flat. I think from there is where I started to make my own world. Drawing the dream house was actually a comfort place. It was a place where most children, you know, you have no control, very little control. And so it was a place that I actually controlled. And so for me, it was a place of comfort. And from there, I think I went into the war drawings, which was also, it's war drawings, but it's actually a very comfortable place for me. And I'm actually on both sides at the same time. I'm on the X's and the dots. It depends on my mood. And so they're always fighting. It's very simple. Actually, at certain points, I thought about adding a third or fourth, you know, squares and triangles and various other, but then I thought, no, that's too complex. It's much better just to have X's and dots. It's very straightforward. And they live in this world, you know, where I would make this two-dimensional world where I would make their houses and their factories, and they would be constantly fighting each other, and they would have these walled cities, very much like the European cities, the walled cities. And so they were always going back and forth, and they were always changing because I would go in and I'd erase them and kill each other and go back and forth. And so erasing is actually an essential part of the war drawings, because it creates time, because it's like I'll start a war drawing at a certain time, and then I'll get bored with it, and I'll put it away for a year, and then a year later I'll work on it again. So some of these drawings I can work on for 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 years or more. I think I made the first one in the early 90s. Just a lot of it stuff, just by random, but by just buying a sketchbook and starting to draw. Instead of doing regular drawings in it, started doing war drawings and then expanded it. I think it was more like a diary. It's not writing, but it's my form of writing. And over a period of time, if I continue, unless I sell it to somebody, I continue working on them, and they go back and forth. And at certain points, in some of them, they overrun each other and they're killed. And so it's almost, a lot of it's erased, and then they rebuild over the erasing. So you can see the ghost image of the former city, much like what you see in Rome. You see, like, you know, the Roman Empire, you know, from the early Romans to Christians to et cetera, on down, and in a lot of mostly European cities, which in a way, I guess maybe the war drawings is almost like jumping from one dimension to two-dimensional to fourth dimension time, because they're constantly changing, which we're all constantly changing.